Hi all, Sam White here from Lovatsville in Victoria. Welcome to a chat we're having with Jane Henning from Pedigree Dynamics. I've been familiar with Jane's work for a number of years now and first came across, I suppose, her expertise whilst I was at Coolmore. When I set up Lovatsville, one of the first ports of call was Jane to have her dive deeply into the pedigrees and potential nicks and matings that the breeders could hopefully thrive and succeed off the back of. Always been a big fan of your work. Jane, thanks for joining us and tell us a bit about yourself and Pedigree Dynamics.
Thanks, Sam. I'm really thrilled to be involved with this. This is a really great little project. But yeah, I've been working with pedigrees for, it makes me sound really old, but at least 35 years. Yeah, I won't delve into the long history, but basically, yeah, I've been working professionally as a pedigree analyst for about 35 years. I did a bit of work overseas to start with a couple of well-known pedigree analysts there, because it wasn't something that had a job title in Australia back then. But I got some great clients early on, and it's just been a passion of mine ever since.
That's great. Where were you based overseas?
In England.
Oh, great. Okay. And interesting you say, I mean, the depth of the pedigrees that we often see from those European families coming out here, obviously a lot we can learn from and something as an industry in Australia we're certainly aspiring towards.
Yes.
All right. Now, we've done a bit of background work on the 4 stallions that are standing at Lovatsville. In order, we're going to go Fierce Impact, Royal Meeting, Generation, and then Gold Trip. The beauty of your work is that it provides something unique and interesting for the breeder. A big believer that type plays an enormous role, obviously the stallion, but we need to know sort of what works further back. And I think when I look at your stallion notes that are on our website, www.lovatsville.com, where you can go and reference each of the stallions and see some of Jane's work on the stallion pages, I sort of read them and I understand most of it. I can look through it and say, oh, that makes sense. I understand that. But I still find myself getting tripped up sometimes. It's not that the work is complex. It's just that there's so much detail to it. So a part of today is, I suppose, discussing, certain sire lines or potential matings or dominant females that we might want to breed back to. But I'll throw a few questions at you and sort of unpick some industry vernacular and a few terms and phrases that might help some of the listeners learn a little bit through this process.
Great. Yeah, it's great to be able to educate people along the way, so that it makes the analyses much easier to understand and sort of to then implement.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it. I suppose from a structure standpoint, I probably want to talk about the stallions physically and what we might be seeing and what they might need to complement. And then knowing there's certain sire lines that physically can provide that, but then genetically, just love to get your insight. So with Fierce Impact, I look at him physically and I'm like, what does he need? I personally think the horse could do with a pinch of scope, and a slight bit of quality. Both attributes that can be sourced from a variety of sire lines. But if I think about it, I'm looking at the likes of a Savabeel, O'Reilly, No Nay Never I Love, and thinks a great emerging broodmare prospect. So you think who started well with a slipper winner, Reduced Choice. I'm being harsh on an animal that won 3 Group 1s at a mile and, superbly bred horse. But, that's the depths that we want to go to here and just challenge within this recording. With those stallions in mind, from a physicality standpoint, what do you think genetically or pedigree-wise we can sort of work with?
Yeah, genetically he also does. He carries alope family members, tail and round table via Pompey Court to reinforce Deep Impact, Gone West and round table from the same family. Deep Impact over mares carry more of the alope line has produced Group 1 winners like the 2021 champion sprinter of Japan, Grand Allegria. Pompey Court also reverses the Damascus round table cross present in Fierce Impact's Third Dam Edge, which is a nice pattern.
Okay, so there's a lot of positivity there. I mean, physically, I think it's a lovely mating. I think any of those sort of Kiwi mares, would work quite well with Fierce and they just complement each other well. But from a genetic standpoint, that sounds like it's really strong. For anyone listening either in the car or at home, sort of watching of an evening, hopefully you're swirling a glass of red. We'll also have some we'll have some examples that'll pop up on the screen throughout the course of this. And at least then you can refer back to what Jane and I are discussing. But back to Fierce Impact, Jane. No Nay Never. It's probably going to be one of those tangents that I'll go off and investigate myself over time. But I just think he's a really exciting broodmare prospect.
Yeah, he's an interesting stallion. We did mention his sire Scat Daddy in Fierce Impact's compatibility report on your website, because the Stormcat sire line has worked very well with Deep Impact. And in addition, Scat Daddy's sire Johannesburg is another member of the Alap family, which boosting Deep Impact and Gone West. You'll see this is an ongoing pattern with him, because it's such a strong family in his makeup, Fierce Impact, the Alap family. This mating creates a 4x4 inbreeding to elusive quality through a son and a daughter, which at this point in time hasn't been tried frequently enough to say whether it's a successful pattern for him. But that type of pattern, the inbreeding through son and daughter, is generally the most successful when you do inbreed.
Okay, that's very interesting. That's something I'd love to touch on later. I think it can be referred to as the sex balancing piece, and we'll dive into that a little bit later on. But elusive quality, we obviously know what a great influence he's been out here, in particular as a sort of broodmare sire influence. Scat Daddy's dam sire, Smarty Jones, is by elusive quality, and K.I. Gerbera, Fierce Impact's dam, was a fast filly herself. She was a multiple Group 3 winner and over a short course. So hopefully we're seeing sort of some of that speed come through. And as a sire, prospect and influence, he's really interesting in that he's got probably the best speed profile of any of Deep Impact's top tier horses. So that's obviously coming through from the dam side, and something that we're really hoping to see in his offspring. We see them as being really classy sort of mile sorts that'll push out obviously to a mile and a quarter and a classic trip. But that elusive quality 4x4 inbreeding is going to be interesting. Reduced's Choice, he's another one. He works with everything, let's be honest, but he probably looks at a bit of a layup here.
Yeah, he's a no-brainer. Pretty much any son of Danehill or other Danzig sons will work very nicely with him, because Fierce Impact carries a daughter of Danzig, which is unusual. Usually you're seeing the sons of Danzig in Stallion's pedigrees. So sons and grandsons of Danzig look a logical complement to him. Hitotsu, Group 1 winner, carries a sex-balanced Danzig cross, as do many of Capitalist Stakes winners, because like Fierce Impact, he carries a daughter of Danzig. Stallion's carrying a daughter of Danzig over Reduced's Choice, is performing at nearly 7% stakes winners to runners at this stage.
Okay. That's obviously a really, really good stat, and something that we might look to, I suppose, monitor. Fierce has covered over 400 mares in his first 3 seasons. We're well aware there's a strong Danehill influence, so that might be something for us to map as his first runners sort of start hitting the track. Saberbill, touching and sort of that Kiwi O'Reilly piece, I think physically it's going to be a lovely complement for Fierce.
Yeah, nice quality horse. Again, he reinforces the Alap family by carrying a duplication of Round Table to add to the family members of Deep Impact, Gone West and Round Table in Fierce Impact. His size, the bill, is bred on a Sariva Northern Dancer combination, which is actually present twice in Fierce Impact's 6th generation pedigree. So this creates a desirable little sort of repetition of clusters. Okay, and this is one of those sort of industry terms or phrases I actually wanted to touch on, but when you say a cluster pattern or a cluster repetition, it sounds reasonably obvious, but can you give a little bit more context? Yeah, sure. Well, say you might have a stallion, as I say, that's got a Sariva Northern Dancer combination in that pedigree, Sabil, and if you see that in the mare, you might see it through another ancestor, and I can give some examples later on of that cluster patterns. You're sort of reinforcing those really good ancestors that you want to influence the foal. Sariva Northern Dancer, excellent ancestors. So if you can sort of reinforce those clusters, it seems to sort of give the pedigree a real good kick up. Okay, interesting. All right, well, as you said, we might touch on that a little bit later and provide some examples that'll pop up on screen as well. Yeah. So you think he started really well as a broodmare sire, obviously a Golden Slipper winner in the infancy of his broodmare sire career. What are your thoughts on him? Yeah, well, again, his dam sire Tights repeats the Northern Dancer Round Table combo in Fierce Impact's Grand Dam. Deep Impact over Sadler's Wells line mares has been successful cross, with 5 Group 1 winners to date, including the recent Prince of Wales Stakes winner Auguste Rodin.
I think they've nominated him for the Cox Plate as well. I think there might be a chance he comes out here.
Wow, that'd be exciting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be. I have, obviously dove reasonably deeply into Deep Impact and the influence he's had. Off the top of my head, I think he's had 4 males that have won 3 or more Group 1s. Auguste Rodin is one. Contrail, obviously, outstanding racehorse and emerging sire in Japan, is another. Yeah. And there's another horse whose name escapes me, but he was a high-class stayer in Japan, and Fierce Impact. So he keeps really good company, has been at the pointy end of Deep Impact's most successful males. Okay. Genetically, I really want to double down on the toughness that Fierce Impact had as a racehorse. Matt Smith sort of waxes lyrical about how tough the horse was. A lot of farms that we speak to about the stock that they work with, they say they're tough and they're willing. They're not cantankerous or hard to work with, but they are steely, and there's a bit of resolve there. We're hearing it from breakers, hearing it from sort of early entry into training yards as well, that they're just tough and willing. I think of how tough and durable Pride of Dubai mares are, really well-bred son of Street Cry. How would the Pride of Dubai sort of sire line match up with Fierce, as well as that maternal side that I mentioned, Pride of Dubai is from the family of Invincible Spirit, Kodiak, etc. What are we looking at there with Pride?
Yeah, his sire line, which traces to Mr. Prospector via Machiavellian, should work very well with Fierce Impact. Mr. Prospector has a long history of compatibility with Danzig on Fierce Impact's third remove, and Machiavellian is from the same family as Halo and Northern Dancer in his pedigree. On his female side, his second dam, El Jazzy, who's also on Invincible Spirit's female line, carries Round Table from the same family as Deep Impact, which is a tick. There's also another ancestor in there, Rockefeller, who gets the best out of Danzig, tracing to the same ancestress, Lady Susan. That's a cross I really love. And I'm Invincible, you mentioned. He adds a third member of the Lady Susan family, which is Bletchingley. So you've got that Lady Susan family, to me, has quite a significant impact when you get those 3 or even 2 of those ancestors together, Danzig, Rockefeller and Bletchingley is the third one.
Yeah, so we're saying there's scenarios or outcomes there where we might be seeing Lady Susan sort of 3 times in a mating with I'm Invincible mares or Pride of Dubai mares. Is that a good thing? Is that too many times? Inbreeding is such an interesting topic, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not really an inbreeding, because to sort of the Lady Susan herself would be further back. So these are just 3 ancestors of hers. So it's really line breeding to her. But that Danzig, Bletchingley, Rockefeller cross, and bearing in mind those 3 horses came from 3 different parts of the world. But those crosses, you can see all 3 of them in horses like Alabama Express, Danceteria, D'Argento, Empire's Choice, God's Own, I'm Invincible himself, Inference, Miss Finland, Museer, Peeping, Quick Thinker, The Mission. I mean, it does go on and on. They're the ones I know of. I haven't, without delving into, but yeah, it's a really great cross, and it's sort of one of my things that I sort of like to seek out.
Okay, so that's a very, very impressive list of horses. And from what you're saying, it's quite a unique cross or pattern. So it wouldn't, let's say the percentage or strike rate would be reasonably strong. I'd say all the pedigree buffs, or in inverted commas, sickos out there might really dive into investigating that Danzig, Bletchingley, Rockefeller piece. So that's great insight. Yeah. Thanks for that. Love that. Jane, we obviously touched on a few of our own theories, and I'm throwing some pointers at you, like some things that I'm interested in exploring. What's something you see inside of Fierce Impact's pedigree that breeders could or should be exploring?
Well, with Halo and 3 Lines Northern Dancer in his pedigree, he's an obvious choice for the Danehill and Machiavellian lines, because they're from the same family. So that's just straight up good, strong line breeding. And, as far as looking back in line breeding, I generally just look back to about 7 generations, because really, to look further back, you might hear of someone saying, oh, on the 12th generation, there was papyrus and white eagle and all that sort of fantastic stuff. Like, those ancestors are very important. But to my way of thinking, if they're not within the 7 generations, those ancestors that are representing those fantastic influences further back should still be sort of discoverable within 7 generations. Those best representatives of those lines are the ones that are still going. So I'm looking up to 7 generations. Some people obviously only look to 5, but I think you can see quite a lot of patterns evolving over 7. That's my way of looking at it.
Okay. And a matter of interest, like, I use Arian to do a lot of my pedigree work and all the rest. What do you use for anyone out there that might be, looking to invest in some software or some pedigree data to help them?
I use Tessio Power. I've used Tessio Power for probably 30 years. It's a database that you can add to yourself. It's not connected to the internet, so you can buy updates, but I just enter all my own horses. But it's a great way to look at pedigrees from any way you want to. You can look at it from, tail male, tail female. You can highlight sort of common ancestors to both sides of the pedigree. You can look at dosage if you're that way inclined. It's just a fantastic database. But I also use Group 1 Goldmine. I use the pedigree function, not so much the stallion match, I like to do that myself, but the pedigree search. So, I'd be looking at the success of, say, a sire over a broodmare sire. And that's a great resource as well, just to back up. If I think I like something in a pedigree or a mating, and I think, well, let me just check how that cross is going, because sometimes, a cross doesn't work even though it should, in theory.
Yeah.
So those are the two main ones that I use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. We've got the G1 Goldmine plug into our website, and I find, the product and the team at Goldmine, led by Matt, they're outstanding. I think they've got a great product that they continue to work with and evolve.
His impacts lines that we should be looking for, but a little bit left field. But big brown mares create a really interesting pattern with him. His sire boundary is a full brother to Fierce Impact's Grandam, which creates 4x4 inbreeding pattern to their parents, Danzig and Edge, which is a really quite a pretty pattern on a page.
Okay, interesting. Right. We've actually got a couple of mares booked in to Fierce by Big Brown, so I don't know if that's pure coincidence. I'll have to call. One of the breeders is out of WA, bought a mare from one of Bob Peters' families by Big Brown and has sent it across. So hopefully they're listening, or otherwise I'll give them a call after. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I would say they probably did look at that and say, "Oh, that looks fantastic."
Okay, great. Okay, I might. I think that's a great run through on Fierce Impact. I mean, genetically, he's so open to the pool here, being Danehill free, and obviously Danzig reinforcement working well. So that's a tick. But I think a few gems that we've taken out of here. The listeners, the Big Brown left field one I love, and then some of that sex balancing piece around Danzig with some examples through sort of Capitalist, etc.
I think he'd be very
that's really effective.
Basically, he will be very easy to mate with the Australian population.
Yeah, that's so good. All right, let's dive into Royal Meeting. He's an exciting horse in our roster. He's champion first season sire of Victoria. Another one that probably is reasonably available to breed to. Given his pedigree, it's quite interesting. But if I go back to physically, I mean, he's a horse that he stands at about 16.5, good size horse, good strength, good substance, good quality. And he does have the ability to throw a bit of that strength into his stock and complement some of those smaller, tidier mares. A Danehill outcross, he sort of looks an obvious connection to those neater style of Danehill sprinting sorts. How does that work on a blood front? What are you thinking there?
Yeah, well, for sure, Danehill line mares will suit him on pedigree, as he's only carrying 2 lines to Northern Dancer from this family, which is quite unusual to be so light in that family. So you can pile up all the Danehill and Halo and Machiavellian that you like into him. Looking at fellow Invincible Spirit son, I'm Invincible, he's produced nearly 9% stakes winners from mares carrying Danehill, which is pretty good.
Okay. So we sort of get that physical complement where we think it's going to work, and then you're sort of saying that the blood should be working. So, I mean, a lot of breeders are going to be looking at the same. Obviously, on that Danehill piece, and Royal Meeting's first crop had a Group 1 winner from his first crop, Hayasugi's out of a Commands mare. What else did you see in that pedigree that, outside of just the Commands influence, that may have helped Hayasugi be all that she is?
Well, as I mentioned in our discussion about Fierce Impact, the Danzig Rockefeller Bletchingley combination is very potent, and Royal Meeting carries Danzig and Rockefeller, and Hayasugi's dam carries Bletchingley on her third remove, along with another line of Danzig. So she's another example of how successful this three-way nick is.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. It's come up twice now and early on in the combo. So something we might hopefully see from breeders really look towards that and, put some mares our way that are working along those lines. Aside from sort of Hayasugi and the Danehill combo, James Bester, one of the great guys in the industry, such a great judge and a great mind. He just always used to say, sort of working with James, black cats get black kittens. That was his favourite sort of saying, And I sort of revert back to a Royal Meeting, and if we're looking at a physical complement again and understanding we need a genetical piece, and our aim is to breed good racehorses. There is a commercial element to the industry.
Sure.
He's a commercial young sire. So if we're trying to double down on some of that quality and, the lovely rich colour that he's got and, his fantastic features and strength, I can sort of see him producing nice types by Lonhro or Piero, and then taking that physical strategy discussed, even further and looking for a dominant source of maternal on 2-year-old speed. More Than Ready mares, I imagine, would touch up really well with Royal Meeting.
Yes, for sure. More Than Ready is very strong in the La Troyenne family, being a family member himself and carrying Woodman and Buckpasser from this line. I mean, when you look at More Than Ready's pedigree, he's a classic example of a line-bred horse. He's from La Troyenne family. His dam sire Woodman is, and Woodman's dam sire Buckpasser is. So that's what a rich source he is of this wonderful family, and probably why he's been such a successful stallion. Royal Meeting carries 2 lines to Buckpasser, which further strengthens this influence. So I think this will be a very good cross. Lonhro
Lonhro Piero.
Yeah, both carrying Round Table to reinforce the A-Lope family, which is represented by Lecture, Atan, which is his dam sire, Royal Meeting's dam sire, Atan and Round Table in Royal Meeting. So that's another good female family that's getting a good boost.
Okay. I think Piero is such an interesting broodmare sire. Looking at his early stats, he's had 7 stakes winners from about 70 or 80 runners. Like, those stats put him not on par, but actually ahead of the likes of Zabeel, Flying Spur and Costa de Largo and Reduced Choice at the same stage of their careers as broodmare sires. He looks to be doing an exceptional job in that sense. So, for anyone out there, we'll do whatever we can to get you Piero mares on our books. So happy to discuss some discounts. And, hopefully plenty of people, given he's covered a lot of mares over the time, are sort of trying to compile them amongst their broodmare bands. Love that you mentioned Buckpasser. He was a horse that intrigued me. I was at Coolmore and Island for a little while, and I spent a lot of time studying pedigrees over there. And the ability to assess what worked best with Galileo and the Saddler's line, I just kept coming across Buckpasser and I became obsessed. I'm sort of thinking, why is he so good? What is it that he's got or gives 2 mares or 2 pedigrees that just helps him thrive?
Yeah, well, he was a much better broodmare sire than he was a sire of sires. And being the second dam sire of Danehill, we see him all the time in Aussie pedigrees. Last Tycoon side, Try My Best, is another one out of a Buckpasser mare. So you'll see him in Written Tycoon and his progeny. As I mentioned, he's in More Than Ready's pedigree. So you'll see him through his daughters, as well as sires like Sebring, Rebel Dane and Better Than Ready. And Galileo also carries Buckpasser. So you can see why he seems to pop up everywhere. And he's from that wonderful La Troyenne family.
And just reinforcing his blood, 2-3 times over, just not an issue.
No, it works, More Than Ready being a prime example.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we're going to touch on the obvious one now. Royal Meeting is a son of Invincible Spirit, as is the great I'm Invincible. Are there any parallels that you can see between the two that breeders should be mirroring? Like, obviously Vinny's been such an amazing success. It's only natural that people are going to look and try and replicate what's happened. and
Yeah.
draw back to Invincible Spirit and tie that in. Is that something we should be doing or shouldn't be doing? What are your thoughts?
I wouldn't put too much emphasis on that. I don't think they should, try and emulate the patterns that I'm Invincible is working with. I mean, I'm Invincible works with quite a number of different things anyway. He doesn't have a specific pattern, but he and Royal Meeting have very different female pedigrees. Their dams pedigrees are vastly different. So, bearing in mind it's only half the pedigree, you really need to see the holistic product that is Royal Meeting. His dam gives you build up of the Alope family. His line breeding to Bramley through Roberto and his brother Mullineaux is very prominent. And the presence of Al Mufti, who's closely related to dam sires such as Honour Grades, Foxhound, Statue of Liberty and AP Indy, which can be, utilised and exploited.
Yeah, AP Indy was an interesting one. I think Sire of Congrats, and I think it was an interesting sort of broodmare influence.
Yeah, Bernardini, Tappet.
Yeah.
Frosted.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So plenty of opportunity for breeders down here to try and access that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you're saying is, just focus on what's successful for Royal as opposed to trying to follow a Vinny, a Brazen Bow, a Hellbent.
Yeah.
I suppose it makes a lot of sense given the sire lines, only one half of the genetical makeup.
Yeah.
With that in mind, we've touched on a few things, but again, I want to throw to you, is there a dominant line or two or something we should be focusing on that we haven't discussed with Royal Meeting?
Yeah, well, that sire that Royal Meeting carries called Al Mufti, he's a lesser known relation of, as I said, AP Indy, Statue of Liberty, Foxhound, Bite the Bullet, Duke of Marmalade, Honour Grades, Raja Baba. These guys appear in many broodmare pedigrees, and they're create valuable line breeding to Missy Barber, who's a real blue hen mare, American line. And, the AP Indy line, as we just said, you've got the likes of Bernardini mares, Congrats mares. Tappet comes through in a few, imported American mares, and he's also the sire of Frosted. So, daughters and granddaughters of those lots would be great for Royal Meeting.
Okay, El Mufti. As you say, lesser known, not one I would have sort of drawn to, but that's a really interesting piece for breeders, no doubt.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a few times through the course of our chat already sex balancing, and it sounds reasonably simple, but I still think it trips some of us up, myself included at times. What does it mean, and can you show some examples for the breeders, and we'll pop them up on the screen here, what it is and why it's worked and how or where it's worked? Yeah,
sure. Yeah, it's a confusing, it does seem to confuse some people, the term sex balancing. It means that the ancestor that you're duplicating in the mating is represented by both a son and a daughter. So the immediate son, the immediate daughter of that actual ancestor. And it tends to have the effect of making that ancestor's influence sharper than it usually is. An example with the Group 1 winner, I Wish I Win. He won 2 Group 1s. Despite winning by Savabeel, all 3 of his stakes wins have been over 1,200 metres. Now, he is sex balanced to Sir Tristram, 3x4, through his son Zabeel and his daughter Star of the Night, his third dam, Wish I Win's third dam. So, that sort of, you'd say, oh, well, that's funny. Sir Tristram's, usually producing more of a dour influence, but with the sex balancing, it's sharpening him up. And another one is Russian Camelot. He was inbred to Sadler's Wells 3x3, which again, you'd think, wow, that's going to be a dour horse. But when you think, that he's sex balanced through Montjeu and a daughter of Sadler's Wells, Balalaika, his second dam. He won and was stakes placed as a 2-year-old and as a 3-year-old. He showed some dazzling speed over distances. So even though he did go over distance, he really had a great speed element to him, didn't he?
Yeah.
His win in the Manicato was very impressive on speed, and he even ran second in the Maccabi Diva over the mile to the mighty Fierce Impact.
There you go. Nice little segue. I'm happy you finished on that one. Okay, that's awesome. I think there's plenty to take away for listeners interested in Royal Meeting. He's proving to be really popular this year, and hopefully this helped reinforce some breeding plans that those listeners out there have already put in place. I want to jump to Generation, new horse on the block for us. Horse I knew really well from my time at Kieran's, involved in buying him and throughout his career. He's a stunning looking horse. I mean, it's one of the main reasons we got him. He's obviously well bred and he's extremely quick, but he's just such a good looking animal. Beautiful colour, beautiful head. Physically, what I love about him too, he's got great length and he's got great strength, a great hip on him. Physically, you can sort of see him being the type of stallion that throws really, really good looking stock. And it's interesting, I suppose I'm trying to be extremely positive on this, but I was happy to hear I was at the Melbourne broodmare sale, the Great Southern Sale recently, and when we paraded Generation, there were a couple of the former Blue Gum Farm employees that when he was walking around, they sort of came up to him and they said, he's just, he's a male version of Personal inside his Grandam. They just said you could just see so much of her, and she was obviously a stakes winning sprinter up the straight. They're just like, he's just such a masculine version of her. So genetically, hopefully that's a stamp that's sort of coming through, and as a market, we love to see a stallion that can stamp their stock. So hopefully, that's what we're aiming for with him. He's out of Fontaton as well, by Snitzel out of Fontaton. She was brutally quick and a really, really attractive filly. Something I want to see with him in breeders is really doubling down on that quality, breeder type, breeder quick type and early type. And, I think he's going to be type-wise suited to those good-sized Vinny mares that are so good-looking Zoo Star mares. Exceed and Excel, Snitzel's worked well with early doors, Written Tycoon from a speed factor. How do those kind of colonial speed options stack up with a Generation?
Yeah, I think they're all valid options for him. Of course, Vinny, Zoo Star and Written Tycoon mares are yet to really reveal their obvious patterns of compatibility, being fairly young in that role. But as you say, Snitzel over Exceed and Excel has produced the Group 2 winner Lofty Strike. So that's a proven cross at this stage.
Yeah, I think there's there's another 3 or 4, not 3 or 4, I think there's 4 stakes winners in total bred on the cross over 60 or 70 runners. So Exceed's going to work with Snitzel, and it's that speed on speed factor. Zoo Star, and I'm going to go off on a tangent here, throughout the course of the sale season last year, we just sort of saw Redute's inbreeding when it was via Zoo Star seems to have an exceptional strike rate with some really high class horses. I'm eager to get as many Zoo Star mares to Generation as we can and really test and explore that theory further. I think physically there's going to be a complement. Genetically, it seems like it's working. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know why uniquely Zoo Star seems to be the one that, inbreeding to Redute's Choice seems to work with. Generally speaking, Redute's Choice, inbreeding to Redute's Choice runs at about 4.6% stakes winners to runners with no Group 1 winners. But with Zoo Star, he's had 6 group winners on that inbreeding thing. So he's obviously creating that sex-balanced cross because he's got a daughter of Redute's Choice in his pedigree. And with Generation being by a son of Redute's Choice, you're going to emulate that pattern. Okay.
I think some really high-class horses, and those 6 stakes winners come from quite a small sample size. I'll actually dig up some stats while we're talking about this. Just intrigues me greatly. All right, well, another thing I suppose with Generation, over those Zoo Star mares, you're getting that Snitzel and Costa cross that's been really successful as well. Group 1 winner Invader is amongst a number of horses that have successfully explored that cross. Why do you think that is? And within Costa, but then also with Reduce, what else do you think is helping make this happen? I suppose I'm, banging this drum on as hard as I can. What else is there if we're diving a bit deeper?
On what, Snitzel and Costa de Largo cross?
I think let's go Snitzel and Costa first, and then, probably see if there's anything else with Redute's maternal line that sort of helps us make the magic happen.
Snitzel and Costa de Largo cross. I'm just trying to think. Let me just get it up on the screen, on my screen, my Tessio screen, and I'll just have a good look at it.
This is one of those moments where I said I'd put you on the spot. So
yeah, okay.
Touching on, here we are, Redute's Choice inbreeding to Zoo Star. I've just brought it up on my screen, and there's 97 runners for 9 stakes winners. So you're going at 10% early doors on a stat that's going to improve. North Star Lass, Hawkbury on her, Schwartz, Zoo Tiger. There's some really handy horses there.
With Snitzel over in Costa de Largo, there's no standout cross. I mean, there's a duplication of Survivor. There's Northern Dancer comes through. There's 5 lines of that. You've got Mr. Prospector through in Costa del Lago, who's proven to work really well with Reduced Choice and Danehill. So I'm not sure, apart from saying that in Costa del Lago is an outstanding broodmare sire. I think he does work with a lot of lines, but Weiss Schnitzel in particular, I don't think he's particular to in Costa del Lago, but it's definitely across it will work.
Yeah, okay. So Invader, sort of state communist. I think there's a few on that sort of cross, obviously through a few different channels, Quintessa, but there's nothing that sort of jumps out and we can just say
no,
it works.
I think in Costa is just one of those standout broodmare sires that can work with a lot of different lines, or has. Yeah.
So amazing. He's done it the hard way too, hasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. He sure has. He's earned his stripes. He hasn't had all the favours early, at least, anyway.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Reduce. What did you want to say about Reduce? I can't remember now.
That's okay. No, I think he's obviously. Are there any other family members that would help generation? Again, that sort of in Costa del Line, a horse like Rubik's from from the family of Reduce. Is that going to work with a horse like Generation?
For sure. Yeah. Reduced Choice's maternal line is a very prepotent family. It traces back to a mare called Torpenhow.
Okay.
Other members of the family which should work very well with Generation, they include Manhattan Rain, Rubik, Almahar, Hurricane Sky, Good Journey. So horses that are very accessible as dam size. Nijinsky II is also from his family and has the added benefit of working very well with Stormbird, who's present twice in Generation's pedigree.
Okay, interesting. Love Stormbird, so that's great to see.
A real great launching pad, that Reduced Choice family, the Torpenhow family.
The actual, the family itself. Okay, interesting. On that, is there anything else, like it's, he's by Schnitzel, he did the business himself, undefeated 2-year-old, won a couple of Group 3s at 3, and then a Group 1 performed sprinter on a couple of occasions at the Valley, out of a filly called Fontaton, who we all knew as just being, an absolute speed machine, and the Grand Dam, is a stakes winning sprinter down the straight by Rubiton. Colonial Speed 101. Is there anything else we should be looking at?
Yeah, well, I'd really like to see Bella Spree mares going to him. He's a grandson of Nijinsky, so you're reinforcing Reduced Choice and also complementing Stormbird in Generation's pedigree. And he's out of a Vane mare, which obviously offers the Colonial Speed that you're talking about.
We have picked up a couple of nice mares. Tycoon Tara, Group 1 winning Britain Tycoon mares going to him. There's a damn Jim Crack winner last week. So he's building a nice little book, but all right, so Bella Spree mares. I might get a Bella Spree mare out of an Exceed or a Lonro mare. That could be the go. All right, so sort of like let's sort of steer off Generation and wrap there, but I want to get a little bit of insight from you. Everything we've touched on so far, what's one little gem you could offer to breeders out there? Like what's something that you could just help them, I suppose?
Well, we touched on cluster patterns a bit earlier on, so I might just explain that and give a couple of examples of that. So it's really an extension of a nick, being a successful cross of a stallion over a broodmare sire. Well, that's the nick, but I call it a cluster pattern, and it's an obvious example is in Very Elegant, who's not a bad racehorse, whose sire Zed's dam is bred on a Danehill Cotahelli House cross, Cotahelli House being a representative of that wonderful 8-carat family. And Very Elegant's dam also carries Danehill and Cotahelli House within 3 generations. So it's quite an obvious pattern, which no doubt, Sam, you can put up on the screen.
Yeah, I will. That'll be, I mean, she was such a bloody star, so that's definitely a great one for people to have a look at and give context to a cluster pattern.
Yeah, another one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Hellbent's still Group 1 winning daughter, Magic Time. She's out of a Niconi mare who carries the same Danzig-Bletchingley combination, which is present in I'm Invincible, her grandsire. And also a bit further back, Invincible Spirit on her sire line carries a Northern Dancer round table pattern, which is reversed in the pedigree of Magic Time's 3rd dam, Mystic Chantry. So there's lots of nice little double ups and patterns in there. Another one is Fangirl. Her
Okay.
sire Sebring's Dancei Flying Spur carries a Northern Dancer Rolls Cross, which is a similar combination to Fangirl's Dancei and Costa del Lago. Flying Spur and Costa del Lago being very closely related. And Sebring's grandsire Southern Halo has a Hail to Reason Northern Dancer Cross, which was reversed in the pedigree of Fairy King on Fangirl's Dancei line. So reversing those clusters is also kind of a nice pattern, a bit like sex balancing. It seems to sort of G up things.
Okay, interesting. Well, what I'll do is obviously some star racehorses in the modern era, and we'll pop up those examples. So anyone sort of listening can also watch along and sort of see what Jane's actually talking about and lining up. All right. So that now leads me to Gold Trip, new addition to the roster. Fabulous racehorse, obviously extremely popular on the track and, thankfully proving to be popular off the track with breeders. He's been really well priced, and I think that resonates too.
Yeah.
Physically, he's a lovely shape. He's got a nice rich colour to him. He's got a good head and he's very athletic. He's got great bone as well. And I think a lot of people, when they, come to see him and think or consider a European horse or an import, they naturally think of a lighter boned horse. Pleasantly they're surprised that that's not the case when they see him. He's a horse that had great stamina, and with that and being a good shape of a horse, you'd expect a great girth and a shoulder, of which he has. However, physically, I think if you're going to strengthen one thing, I think you'd try and strengthen him up behind the saddle. That sort of leads me to think, the physical complement of an Encosta or an Encosta line horse, given he throws such a strong straight hind leg into his sons and daughters, and a Street Cry line. Sort of, would either two of those work with Gold Trip?
Yes, both of them will work with Gold Trip, in my opinion. In Costa del Lago, he's a definite. Gold Trip carries Saddler's Wells and his three-quarter brother Nureyev, while in Costa is by Saddler's Wells' brother Fairy King. So you're getting a lovely build-up of that family. And his son Northern Meteor is another member of Vibrous Tail female line. That's the Goody Two Shoes family. Up closer, you'd probably know it as the Thong family, but Goody Two Shoes is the mare further back that several other great ancestors also tap into, such as Val de Loire in Sabile's Pedigree.
Okay.
And Street Cry, he also works on paper, as he's the son of Machiavellian, which is the same family as Danehill and Northern Dancer, who has 5 lines in Gold Trip, Northern Dancer. Machiavellian's dam sire is Halo, also from this family. And Street Cry's son, Street Boss, also adds a daughter of Blush and Groom to Sex Balance's son, Rainbow Quest in Gold Trip. So Street Boss would be another lovely match for him.
Okay, like Jamie Lovett, Australian Bloodstock, they're obviously heavily involved in the horse and supporting him strongly this year.
Mm-hmm.
He was really keen on, putting some good, local speed into the horse through some mares they're sending. And, I think a Northern Meteor or a Street Boss is going to be music to his ears.
Good.
Yeah. I think interestingly, but perhaps not surprisingly, given he's a grandson of Exceed and Excel, but Gold Trip's a CT short on the genomic testing, which really means he's a miler at heart and a mile and a quarter horse. So, and that was quite evident with his Turnbull Stakes victory, where he was just so explosive. So whilst he's a Melbourne Cup winner, naturally the pedigree provides a bit of speed, and from a genome testing standpoint, that's reinforced through him being a CT short. Pedigree and race performance wise, obviously want to put some speed into him that we've just spoken about, but I don't think we need to overcompensate too much. I think we want pedigrees or performers with some sprinting power, and we've touched on some of those already with a Northern Meteor or a Street Boss, but ultimately love to see sort of the class to get around a mile or more. What I'm thinking is those sprinting sorts or a sharper type of So You Think Piero, Tavistock or Savabeel mare, we're mating, kind of like for like, and trying to breed that mile. Awesome. And they bring a bit of speed. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, well, some of them I think I like and some of them not so much. I don't think a So You Think mare will necessarily sharpen Gold Trip's influence, as he duplicates Saddler's Wells through another son, Ty Chaparral, so you're going to get more of the sort of influence of Saddler's Wells come through with doubling them up through 2 sons. Same with Tavistock. His grandsire is Saddler's Wells. The mating with Tavistock will still look like a nice proposition for Gold Trip, but will more likely, in my opinion, produce a staying type. Piero, on the other hand, also carries saddle as well, but through a daughter, which, as we've discussed, is a good speed pattern. He also sex balances Doyun for Gold Trip. Mares by his sire Lonro also look appealing because they'll offer the class as well as some sharpness. Sir Tristram's sex balanced through the two daughters of Sire and Gold Trip offer another line to the speed influence Mr. Prospector. So, yeah, I think Piero and Lonro will be great. Savabeel reinforces some of Gold Trip's classic influences such as Sariva and Nureyev, and he also sex balances Sariva for a bit more speed. But another one to consider is Morris. His daughters duplicate the classic influence Silver Hawk, as well as sex balancing him for additional speed. And Morris's grandsire Grass Wonder is bred on a Silver Hawk Danzig His Majesty cross. So a little, nice little cluster there, which is repeated in Gold Trip Sire Outstrip's pedigree.
Okay, that's interesting. And I know that there's one shareholder in Gold Trip in particular who's recently bought a Morris mare to go to the horse. So I find that fascinating. And from a, physical standpoint or just some feedback from the people involved with the horse, Maurice is probably renowned for throwing a good set of lungs into a horse. And Mark Zara always commented on how clean-winded Gold Trip was. Hopefully something like that can produce a Haitotsu 2.0 for us, who used to blow up all of the data tests and the rest for Kieran and the team.
Right. Yeah.
Just such a good-winded horse. So.
Well, horse bred on this cross, they're going to have to. The other middle distance runners are going to have to watch out because they'll never run out of puff.
Yeah, hopefully. All right, Gold Trip obviously is really unique proposition. We know that, but the stable ultimately saw him as a Cox Plate style of horse. What are one or two of the main things when you see looking at Gold Trip's pedigree, how can breeders best provide themselves with a shot at success? We've touched on a few of them there that I've sort of prompted you with, but, having a look at maybe the early success of a horse like the Autumn Sun, obviously from a calm thing as his Gold Trip, is there something that I'm not discussing or raising with you that you're seeing that people would find really interesting?
Yeah, well, Gold Trip's pedigree is very interesting because his sire Outstrip, who is the son of Exceed and Excel, was a leading 2-year-old in Britain, and he also won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. His dam sire, Outstrip's dam sire El Prado, was also a leading 2-year-old. So the stamina appears to be coming more from the female side of Gold Trip's pedigree, with most of the stakes winners there being most effective over a mile to 2,000. There are a couple of broodmare sires still very young in the role, which creates some interesting and early maturing patterns for Gold Trip that I've found. Shalar, his third dam side drone, is a half-brother to Outstrip's fourth dam. I hope this doesn't get a little bit of a mind twist, and to the dam of El Prado. So he'll be reinforcing the most precocious side of Gold Trip's pedigree. And Astern is by a son of El Prado and out of a daughter of Exceed and Excel, thereby reversing and sex balancing the pattern present in Outstrip, which will also give it a bit of a speed kick along.
Okay, we might try and throw those up on the screen because, as you say, they're really quite interesting. And to sort of left of centre, we've discussed, really dominant or well-known sire lines a lot of the time here, but Shalar and Astern, sort of younger stallions.
Yep.
Poking along and probably in the infancy of their broodmare sire career.
Yes,
But some very interesting facts. We've actually got a stakes performed order of Astern going to Gold Trip on behalf of one of the shareholders, so they'll be delighted.
Oh, fantastic.
Great, yeah. I think that covers it off. I mean, we've covered all the stallions. We've covered an awful lot throughout this, and I think is there anything else that I'm missing, or I think we've gone pretty deep, and hopefully some of the screenshots that we put up provide the context. And is there anything else we're missing or that you wanted to raise?
Not really, Sam. I just hope the listeners can get their head around some of this delving deep into pedigrees. It can be a little bit confusing, but I think the pedigree diagrams will help to explain what we're talking about. But I think you've got a fantastic roster. It's very varied, and I've really enjoyed analysing the stallions. I think there's some great potential there with some of the broodmare sires that we've been able to dig up for them.
Okay, that's great. And we really appreciate your insight. As I said,
I love the work that you do, and I think it adds great value to people out there in making their decisions.
My pleasure.
So anyone wanting to learn more about our stallions, www.lovatsville.com, and you'll be able to navigate your way pretty easily through there. You'll see Jane's pedigree notes on the pedigree section of each of the stallions pages. And then anyone wanting to reach out to Jane, you do private consultancy as well, and
Yes.
it's open for a chat. So your best contact details and website, Jane?
Yeah, my website's pedigree-dynamics.com.au, or you can email me, jane@pedigree-dynamics.com.au.
Okay, perfect. Really appreciate your time and your insight. I found it really, really insightful, and I know a lot of people will have too. So thank you.
My pleasure, Sam. Thank you.